Hello everybody. This is the first of two videos that I'm going to be doing for Chapter 8. Chapter 8 has a lot of substance to it, and I think it will be ideal if we can discuss it in two different videos, as I said. So, to start out, we're talking about performance management, which, as the authors describe it, is an inherently dissatisfying process. And what that means is, by definition, by its nature, it has the potential to be really dissatisfying, not only for the people who are being evaluated, but also for the evaluators. Quite honestly, it's very difficult to do it well. It can involve some of the most difficult conversations that any of us can possibly imagine. Think not of just the kind of person or the person who's doing a fabulous job. Think of the person who really needs you as a coach, as a manager, to intervene, to share difficult information, to tell somebody that they're not doing something especially well. There are a lot of potential negative outcomes that are associated with performance management systems. Some of them include alienation, disruption, dissatisfaction, lots of misdirected behavior, what we would call deviant behavior, poor subordinate-superior relationships, in other words, the managers and the employees, and also poor peer relationships. So there's a lot of potential for negative outcomes associated with that. And let's face it, if we're going to do this really well, it is going to be time-consuming. Now, despite all of that potential for negativity, both Lawler and Worley, and I would agree, we need to do performance appraisals. People need to have feedback on how they're doing. It's the only way that people can actually improve what they're doing. Now, the feedback doesn't only come from a boss in a performance appraisal interview. There are other ways for people to get feedback as well, but we shouldn't discount the value of having one's boss share feedback on how one is doing. So no matter the potential for negative outcomes, we need to really take this seriously, and probably more than anything, imagine that most of those potential negative outcomes are a function of performance appraisal not being done particularly well. So let's focus a little bit on why we need to do it. Why is it so important to have effective performance management, especially in an SMO? Why is this a big deal? Well, the authors argue that, if we're not going to have those fixed job descriptions, giving people feedback is even more important. Letting them know how they're doing, perhaps up against project goals, for example, becomes very important. Performance appraisals also help us to gather the data that we need for goal setting. So, if it's 6 months going forward or a year going forward or whatever the time period is, in order to do a really good job setting goals, we have to know where we've been. We have to know what's realistic, what will be attainable in terms of that goal setting. Sometimes these performance appraisals can be a substitute for directly observing someone's performance. So you gather data from a multitude of sources to try and get as complete a picture as possible of how an employee is doing in a particular job. And that way, you're not really having to watch that person all the time, which is an incredibly wasteful exercise. Performance appraisal also enables accountability. So when we ask people to take on a task, to do something, we're able to hold them responsible for what they said they would be responsible for. It allows us to focus not only on outcomes, especially those for the organization, but also the process, to think about how is it that we are engaging with our most important assets, our people. It also, if it's done right, and that's very important, enables us to fairly, that's a key word here, recognize and reward people for being innovative. You can't rely on hearsay. You can't rely on bad data. You need the best data possible in order to properly recognize and reward people. And again, I can't reinforce this enough. Reinforcement theory, one of the most important theories that we have to help us understand what makes people tick, tells us that people move toward pleasure and away from pain. If I want someone to do something, for example, I want them to be innovative, I want them to take some risks, then I have to positively reinforce or negatively reinforce that behavior. With positive reinforcement, I'm giving them something for having done what I wanted them to do. Negative reinforcement, I'm taking away something bad because they did something really good. So either way, I'm reinforcing, I am rewarding the desired behavior. And this works. And it makes a difference for people. And when they don't get rewarded for behavior, they tend to not repeat that behavior. So very simply, the law of effect says if you want people to repeat a desirable behavior, you have to reinforce it. Otherwise, in the absence of a reinforcer, people will direct their attention, their efforts elsewhere. Finally, a really good performance management system allows us to gather data not just on the individuals, but on our entire talent pool. Gives us a sense of what are our collective strengths, what are some collective areas that need developing. That enables us to better allocate our resources in terms of professional development. So it's important to have this data at the ready so that when we do find ourselves having money, for example, financial resources that we can use to enable professional development, we know how to allocate it well. Okay, so that makes the case for why we need performance management. Now I want to dive into what Lawler and Worley call universal performance management principles, and they identify 8. Now, what's key here is they're saying that all organizations, it doesn't matter if they're a CCO, an HIO, an SMO, or whatever other acronym you might come up with, these are things that no matter what, organizations ought to be paying attention to them. And I would agree. So the first one talks about starting at the top, and it says, a performance management system, no matter what size the organization is, starts at the top of the organization, starts with an articulation of what the organization's strategy is. What is it that we are trying to accomplish as an organization? What is our strategic niche? That gives us insight into the kind of talent that we need, and more specifically tells us what is it that we need people to do on a regular basis. So we need agreement on what we're trying to accomplish, how we're going to accomplish it, and the measurement stuff. How will we know if we're doing what we say we're doing or what we say we want to do? It is critical that those people at the top, the people in what we call the C-suite, you know, the CEO, the CFO, the COO, the CIO, pick your C, it doesn't matter. You know, your chief medical officer. Every organization has its top, you know, whether they're called something with a C or whether they're an executive VP or a senior VP, or it doesn't matter. These are the core people at the top of the organization. They have to lead performance management. They have to be committed. They have to be subject to the same performance management system that they ask other people to be part of. That is critical. They have to demonstrate through their actions that performance management is incredibly important to them. So important to them that they make time to participate in it. The second universal principle is that the role of HR, human resources, is one of support, not ownership. So they're not the ones responsible for the performance management system. Everybody in the organization is responsible. Specifically, senior management, those top leaders, those folks who are ultimately most responsible, most accountable for the organization's actions, they have to own this performance management system. They can't say things like, oh, well, you know, we just do that because that's an HR rule. And, you know, if we had our way, we wouldn't bother with this or that. Okay, that's not okay. They have to be committed to whatever the system is. And then HR's job is what HR's job is always intended to be, which is support. They're the staff. They help things run smoothly, but they're not the ones who say, you have to do that or you have to do this. Their job is maintenance, not the decision making about why we're doing performance management or even what all the steps should be. Third is setting measurable goals. So we talk about SMART goals. SMART being specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. If you want someone to accomplish any goal, whether it's a personal goal, a professional goal, an organizational goal, there's an awful lot of literature, an awful lot of support that for the notion that those goals have to be smart. They have to fit the characteristics that I just listed. We can't focus on things that are part of somebody's personality or someone's disposition in the sense of, are they pleasant? But rather look at stuff that can be measured, okay? Stuff that we can define well. Because the reality of the way that human beings work is that which gets measured gets done. That's true on a personal level. It's true on a departmental level. It's true on an organizational level. It's true on a societal level. The stuff that we take the time to measure, that's where we allocate our resources. That's what we actually spend time on. So we need to have goals that can be measured. Now, there's been a lot of research done on goal setting since the 1960s. And over and over, the research studies that are replicated over and over say the same things. Difficult but doable goals yield the best outcomes. So people need to be challenged, but it can't be that you're challenged beyond one's capabilities, okay? That just causes people to give up. It has to be that the challenge is sort of just right, okay? So that it's enough to keep us motivated. It's enough to drive us to direct effort, but not so overwhelming that we just give up. As I say in the reading outline, too easy leads to low motivation. Too hard causes people to cheat. They will play games. Nobody wants to look bad. Nobody wants to lose out on a compensation improvement, especially if they think that the system isn't fair, that the process that's used to decide compensation performance is not fair. That's a procedural justice issue. If they decide that the outcomes are not fair, that's a distributive justice issue. And human beings pay attention to both procedural and distributive justice. So we need to help employees set reasonable goals, smart goals, and then we need to get out of their way. The job as a manager is to clear the path, to make it possible for people to succeed, to help them have access to the resources they need to do their job well, and then to let them make decisions about how to do that. Otherwise, what's happening is, good job, manager, you own the goal, not the employee. And really, your job as a manager is to get out of your employee's way. Fourth, we need to rate the outcomes, we need to rate performance, but do not rank people. GE was famous for every year they would rank people according to, performance, and then the bottom 10% would get lopped off, kicked out. Well, okay, here's what's wrong with that. No matter how your system is run, you will always have people in the bottom half. That's unavoidable. You will always have people in the bottom 10%. You could have the most awesome people that you have spent a considerable amount of resource hiring, training. You've invested in these people. They're amazing. But somebody's going to be in the bottom 10%. So, why would you just decide to get rid of people based upon some really truly arbitrary number? Whether it's 10% or the bottom 25% or the bottom whatever. It doesn't matter. It is unavoidable when you rank people that someone will be at the bottom. But that doesn't in and of itself tell you that that person is not doing a good job. You could have everybody performing at a very high level, but you're going to have some that very high are still at the bottom of that very high. So basically, Lawler and Worley, and I agree, are saying, don't do that. When you hire top-notch people and you invest in them, why would you want to just get rid of them because of some arbitrary rule? Okay, this is where I'm going to stop with this first video, and I'm going to pick up with the universal principle number five that Lawler and Worley talk about in the second video.